if you have colorectal cancer and you exercise and you have a structured exercise program, this was presented at ASCO 2025. This was called the Challenge trial. And they showed that a 3-year structured exercise program after colon cancer treatment reduced disease recurrence by 28% and death by 37%. These are numbers that rival chemotherapy. Seriously. And might be slightly better than chemotherapy. It doesn't mean you shouldn't take chemotherapy. You should do both. You want everything you can throw at a colorectal cancer diagnosis. But what that was, kind of moderate to challenging exercise for less than an hour a day. Okay.
Oh, that is so doable.
But another 2025 study by the SCHAR Institute, SCHAR, found that marathoners and ultramarathoners between the ages of 35 and 50 and without any hereditary risk for colon cancer in particular had a huge number of advanced colonic adenomas, the precursors to colon cancer, compared to people who are not athletes. You have found your way to the Lemanne Gordon podcast, where docs talk shop. Happy eavesdropping. I'm Dr. Dawn Lemanne. I treat cancer patients.
I'm Dr. Deborah Gordon. I work with aging patients.
We've been in practice a long time.
A very long time.
We learn so much talking to each other.
We do. What if we let people listen in?
In this episode, Dr. Gordon and I discuss what might be our favorite medication, exercise, and the relationship between exercise and health. Of course, it's no surprise to our audience that exercise is important for health for people of any age and at any fitness level. And you also will know that Dr. Gordon and I both prescribe exercise, and it's one of the most important parts of our routine patient care. Today, though, we dive into something that has surprised us both: the hazards of too much exercise. Exercise may have a dark side, and there are times that we should think twice about exercise and our exercise habits. We might need to tweak our exercise routines to get the most benefit from the time we do spend being active, and we certainly want to avoid over-exercising. So join us as we pore over some of the details. Enjoy this episode.
I think I've always not had a great sense of smell, but for a couple years after COVID, I couldn't smell my jasmine in the backyard.
Oh, that's a loss.
Yeah.
Yes, jasmine is just magnificent.
I can smell that again now.
Oh,
so
good.
I'm working on it. It's coming back. The other news about Alzheimer's this week, which is of, interest for me because it coincided with another article that came out this week. But the Alzheimer's pertinent one was observing that it takes very little exercise to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's.
Oh, that's going to be such good news to some
Isn't
people.
that good news? And so I don't have a watch that does this, but a lot of people have watches that tell them how many steps they take a day. And everybody's always shooting for, I believe, 10,000 steps.
Well, I have a Whoop band, and it tells me, and my iPhone, if I just wear it in my pocket, will sort of tell me how many steps I'm taking. It's trying. It gives me a step count. It doesn't match my Whoop band, which I think is more accurate.
My daughter found out that this accuracy is impaired if you're pushing a stroller and not swinging your arms. Devices you wear on your wrists and hands don't
I'll bet.
count it as well.
Sure.
Anyway, what is your...
My Whoop band says I need 6,000 steps a day, but I also do other forms of exercise.
Yes, you do, which we'll get into the other part of what we're going to talk about. But for Alzheimer's, this study showed that really as little as 5,000 steps a day is one of these, oh my goodness, this is a modifiable risk for Alzheimer's. If you are, and I'm sure you probably have known people. I know people in my personal life and my professional life who somehow switch to a more sedentary lifestyle. Maybe they move into an apartment. Maybe their walking partner can't walk anymore. And they go downhill cognitively. But if they could figure out a way to get in as little as 5,000 steps a day, there seems to be a statistically significant reduction in. So it's an association. Obviously, they haven't done the trial yet. So how we get medical information for our listeners is people observe things in life. And somebody got this idea. I think activity may improve things, so they observe it in people. And if there appears to be an association, wow, the people who walked more did have less Alzheimer's, then you have to test to see if it was that or the fact that they took creatine before they went for their walk. What made the difference? So we don't have it for sure, but it is an observed risk modifier.
I think that's really helpful. And, you can start getting into causation with just associations if you have what's called a dose-response relationship. So if you increase the input and get more of the desired output, that's or undesired, whichever you're looking at, you can start to infer a causal relationship between the two. And that brings me to a question for you is, so 5,000 steps, you can see a difference, but does that mean that 5,000 steps is all you need, or is more exercise better in terms of decreasing Alzheimer's risk, or an association between? Is there an association between more exercise and a decreased risk of Alzheimer's? And is there too much at any point? I mean, I know that you've told me that's what you want to talk about today. So for our listeners, I'm
priming
things here.
But I will say, just in terms of Alzheimer's, sort of from 2 points of view, when they look at this, and again, pretty much just observational, it really does. So, and what they're measuring is not only clinically less Alzheimer's, but less tau accumulation in the brain and then just less cognitive impairment on testing. So
healthy brain tissue and health and better objective performance.
Yes, both those.
Wow.
And it does, more is better in this number of steps for Alzheimer's, and that is observed and cataloged for risk reduction looking forward. If somebody has Alzheimer's, I actually recommend, and this is where it can get into the topic we're going to talk about a little bit today, I don't think you can walk too much. I think the more you walk around in a nice way and chatting with somebody and doing these 5,000, 7,500, 10,000 steps a day, that's all good, and that is really just part of life. If you have, I mean, it should be. If you,
I'm interested in evolution, and I once heard an evolutionary scientist say, the reason that we have brains and the reason plants don't have brains is because brains are the organ of movement. So if you have a brain, you can move around through the world and through your environment and look for food and get away from predators and things like that. If you're just stationary, like a plant, you don't need a brain. So that just that tickled, because the idea that you can't walk too much, I think, evolution agrees with you.
Evolution agrees. But if you actually have Alzheimer's, I'm going to ask you to do two other kinds of exercise. And one of them involves resistance, weight training, exercise, lifting things, because muscle correlates very well with your muscle mass accumulation and efficacy of using it, correlates very well with your brain volume, literally, and your brain function and longevity. And you and I think, are both fans of doing some weightlifting type of exercise, body weight yoga, or actually lifting heavy weights in the gym. But the other thing I ask my Alzheimer's patients to do is to do some kind of exercise that is high intensity. And that could be running if they're younger and healthier than my knees are. What other kinds of cycling, other kinds of intense exercise that people can do along the lines looking almost like a competitive athlete, at least for a few moments while they do it?
Well, you can do that. Just find a little hill to walk up quickly. So walk up as fast as you can up a steep hill for 30 seconds. Oh, that'll be pretty intense for most people.
That'll be pretty intense.
Yeah, intense. When I think of intense, tell me what you tell patients, but I tell patients you should feel like you're breathing very, very hard and that your heart is pounding hard, almost out of your chest, as long as you've been checked for heart disease before you start, everyone, by your doctor or healthcare practitioner. But it should be, there should be some, you should be pushing into the discomfort zone for short periods so that, when you stop, you feel actually invigorated. Don't overdo, but it should be pretty intense and a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and I'd say my suggestions are slightly different verbiage, but really the same message, which is, once you're warmed up, go as hard and fast as you can, but look at your watch, and if you're going for 30 seconds, I bet you can go harder, and just go for 15. That's fine. You're not challenging the clock. You're challenging your capacities. So same thing, ramp it up for a while and then totally recover before you do it again. The reason this is important in Alzheimer's is that in Alzheimer's disease, there is often a contributor of, our blood sugar goes up gradually as we age. Our response to insulin goes down gradually as we age. And the more of that deterioration we have, the harder it is on our brains. And the exercise that best reverses that age-related insulin resistance is high intensity, but in intervals. Just what you said. Don't do it for too long. Just go up the hill. I tell them to go as hard and fast as they can, and if it should be less than 30 seconds, 15 to 30, something like that. So that's actually asking them to have a clock, whereas I think you're giving them a more subjective assessment measure, which is a good idea. I'm going to incorporate that into my next set of instructions. Thank you very much, Dr. Lemanne.
Well, tell us a little bit about, I know you've been looking into this, what you've found out about too much exercise. There's,
right.
I think most people may not have thought about that. It's not relevant to most of us, certainly not to me. But talk a little bit about what does too much exercise do? Is more always better? And how do we know if we're exercising too much?
Well, on a very mundane level, sometimes that too much exercise is not always a good thing. I mean, you do have to live your life and not just exercise. But, something that's come up so starting with the extreme, competitive professional athletes are evidently training much more than they did 20 years ago. So looking at athletes, their measures of their own physical capacity on a momentary test and their performance in sports, like look at how much faster people are running than they used to. Professional athletes, they're pushing the envelope about, could I be doing a little bit more exercise? Could I work out a little harder? And what has been found is that, and this was somewhat in response to general official health guidelines about what's the optimal exercise. So for the Alzheimer's, 5,000 steps a day is the minimal exercise. What's optimal is more than that. But when you do even more than that, there's some evidence that is actually pushing past the window of benefit for your heart and cardiovascular system and going into the area of cardiovascular risk.
Well, now, how much exactly for our listeners? Do we know?
They do have an idea about this. Before we go on, may I ask you a quick favor? Hit the subscribe button. Your hitting that subscribe button really, really matters. You're making sure cutting-edge ideas that matter to you move to the center of medical discourse, where they belong. Thank you. if you think about you're walking along and you're having a chat with your friend, they can measure that in METs, and METs is a metabolic measure, and I bet you actually know what that is.
I confess, when you told me what we were going to talk about, I looked this up because this is something that I really am interested in. A MET hour is 1 hour of an activity scaled to how many times above your resting metabolic rate your body is working. And adults are advised to get 10 to 20 MET hours of moderate activity per week. What does that mean? That means about 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week. Brisk walking, which is considered a 3.5 mile per hour pace, which is pretty darn fast.
It is.
I find that difficult to sustain for a long.
At this age, I must say that's true. It didn't used to be true.
I'd rather maybe I could jog at that pace, but it's hard to walk at 3.5 miles per hour. It's kind of almost, you want to start jogging anyway, just because it's awkward. There's a 2025 study in the journal Circulation, which is put out by the American Heart Association. And they talk about walking 30 to 40 minutes a day, 6 days a week, and that's about 13 miles per week, which is 2 to 2.5 miles each day, up to 7.5 hours per week for 60 to 65 minutes per day, 7 days a week. So, and that goes up to about 4 miles per day, 7 days a week. So somewhere in between there, 2 miles a day for 6 days a week to 4 miles a day for 7 days a week at 3.7 miles per hour is kind of the sweet spot for at least heart health. More than that, so more than 4 miles a day for 7 days a week at a pretty fast clip, you start to see some heart disease. The ordinary heart disease, coronary artery calcifications are higher in people who do that amount of exercise. So that's what I think, there's a little bit of information about how much exercise. So 2 miles a day to 4 miles a day, 6 or 7 days a week at a fast clip is probably the sweet spot.
But I think most of the actual athletes that are doing this are not really just walking.
Oh, no. This is if you do more than this, which these athletes are,
right,
then you start seeing some issues. Well, yeah, go ahead. Tell us about that.
You gave a really good measure there that somebody could apply to their life and the exercise they do. But you can actually measure how hard is somebody working out in their 30-minute sprint bicycle ride or 30-minute running all out or in their hurdles event or in their rowing event. And this is this article from 2016 is the only article I've ever seen that has a picture of a rower in it. But they've measured people up to achieving 30 METs of exertion, which I can't even imagine. That would be like running, walking fast all day, 7 days a week. I'm not really sure how they would really do that. But what competitive athletes used to be measured up to the rate of exertion that you and I could achieve in a vigorous effort over the week. And now they're getting up to way more than that and even up to twice that measure. So in terms of METs, more than 15 and even up to 30. But that's where they see all sorts of things going on in their heart. One of the studies I found interesting was an increased risk of calcification. Now, they know on a very small, anatomical level some of the benefits of exercise. You should be having really good function of the endothelium, the lining of your blood vessels. When you exercise, you generate a lot of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is the gardener that tends the lining of the inside of our blood vessels. Athletes are supposed to have great endothelial function. You work out your heart, so instead of having a floppy, out-of-shape heart muscle, if you're a well-timed athlete, you have a sturdier heart. Your heartbeat accelerates from very high And if it does that on a regular basis, it also knows how to get very low. So when I was when I was a competitive rower, my resting pulse was, 48 to 52. And now it's more like 60, but that's good to sort of take your heart out for a spin like a hot rod and then let it really totally rest and recover when you're not doing that. So all those wonderful things that you can get from the right amount of even fairly intense exercise can be pushed too far. So yes, despite the nitric oxide, you can get a calcification in your arteries. You can get dysfunction or malformation of the different chambers, the muscles in your heart. And there's a greater risk for cardiac arrhythmias. I think probably everybody's heard of the one that seems to be the most annoying, but still common for people as we age, is atrial fibrillation.
And more than annoying, actually.
Yes.
Leads to earlier mortality and dementia.
And strokes, both silent and very observable strokes. And it's why somebody who has atrial fibrillation, they should be on a blood thinner until they get it fixed, and they should pursue whatever means they can to not have atrial fibrillation all the time. And sometimes that means traveling, because older people are not necessarily the favorite candidate of those who try to reverse atrial fibrillation. Have you seen that in your...
atrial fibrillation and cancer are related.
What?
And so, if a lot of doctors, when they see a new onset atrial fibrillation, will look for a hidden cancer. And because the inflammation is a cause of atrial fibrillation, and inflammation can be upregulated either by a cancer or by the body's response to cancer. So yes, atrial fibrillation in cancer is a thing, and we look for it. And atrial fibrillation itself, I believe, is associated with cognitive decline if it's constant. Mm-hmm. Beyond the micro strokes, I think the intermittent blood pressure changes create some issues in terms of what's called reperfusion injury and those kinds of things. So atrial fibrillation is bad news, but it's very common. 1 out of 4 people in the United States eventually are diagnosed with atrial fibrillation.
I had no idea it was that. I would have said it's really common, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 4. And is that, so there,
a lifetime risk, yeah.
But so there's 2 ways that people see atrial fibrillation, what's called either paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, where people have to wear a monitor to detect that, for half an hour Saturday morning, you were in AFib. And then again Tuesday afternoon. Or there's people who are constantly in AFib.
Well, we think that it progresses from paroxysmal once in a while, just a few palpitations to, longer runs of palpitations, and then those extend. And eventually the heart just doesn't go back into normal rhythm. So we think there's a progression there from intermittent paroxysmal to continuous, or chronic atrial fibrillation. And certainly, once you've got something like that going on, it behooves you to see if it can be reversed. And there are certain procedures where doctors can actually enter through one of the blood vessels into the inner chambers of the heart, try to find the area of irritation of the rhythm and ablate it, and so that the rhythm slips back into the normal patterns. And that's really important if it can be done. It can't always be done.
It can't always be done, and it can't always be done by the first person you consult. So
that is so true.
Yeah.
Boy. Yeah, talk a little bit about that. What's been your experience with?
So I have 2 people locally who were told they were not candidates, and I could see why. One of them did try it twice locally with a cardiologist, and they said, we're not going to do it a third time. The other one, they said, we don't do it with someone with sarcopenia and kidney disease. And third one, a person I know, is a friend who they couldn't really figure out where she would. Anyway, 3 people who had fairly constant atrial fib for quite a while until one of them traveled to Texas, one of them traveled to Southern California from here, and one of them went to a different department at Stanford.
So they basically went to hospitals that had doctors who did a large number of these and had very deep experience with ablation procedures. Is that
right?
What you're saying?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and specialized in people that needed extra monitoring because they had high risk. She has kidney disease, and she, other things, but. And the reversal made such a difference in the quality of her life. One woman told me, I no longer have asthma and emphysema.
Because her heart was
functioning.
Yeah.
And she'd been using medication. She'd been diagnosed and treated with, and some of the medications for asthma are ones you wouldn't want to take constantly if you didn't need to. She doesn't need them anymore because she's back in a normal heart rhythm. So, yes. Okay, we took a circuitous detour.
Well, I think
going
that's
through
important,
atrial fibrillation. Really,
I was interested to hear that what kind of improvement in quality of life fixing atrial fibrillation can have.
Oh, the ability to go for a walk and not collapse halfway through or for the next day and a half because you have a heart that behaves in more of a normal way. Thank you, heart.
When you told me we were going to talk about this, I looked some things up. Do you want to hear some statistics I found?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So running more than 5 to 6 miles per day or 35 to 40 miles per week for over 10 years or 3,000 MET minutes per week, which is 5 hours per week of vigorous activity, like running at 6 miles per hour, which is a 10-minute per mile pace, actually increases the incidence of atrial fibrillation up to 5-fold.
Ooh.
All right. And so I thought that was, a marked increase. It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So there's a lot more coronary artery calcifications in those people, and a lot more atrial fibrillation.
And then again, and both of the things you just said contribute to muscles in the heart either overgrowing and getting thick and not functioning as well as the squeezing device that our heart is.
I think the thought is with these endurance athletes is that the atria actually kind of get stretched, and that tears some of the fibers in the muscle fibers, and they scar up. And in the atria, the upper chambers of the heart, that's where the electrical conduction starts. So if you interfere with the wiring of the atria, you will, increase your risk of rhythm problems. And there's another thing that's kind of interesting about exercise. Can we take a detour to cancer?
Let's take a detour to cancer.
So if you have colorectal cancer, and you exercise, you have a structured exercise program. This was presented at ASCO 2025. This was called the Challenge Trial. And they showed that a 3-year structured exercise program after colon cancer treatment reduced disease recurrence by 28% and death by 37%. Now, these are numbers that rival chemotherapy.
Seriously.
And might be even a little bit slightly better than chemotherapy. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take chemotherapy. You should do both. You want everything you can throw at a colorectal cancer diagnosis. So, but what that was kind of moderate to challenging exercise for less than an hour a day. Okay.
Oh, that is so doable.
But, and this really threw me. I was really surprised. Another 2025 study by the SCHAR Institute, SCHAR, found that marathoners and ultramarathoners between the ages of 35 and 50 and without any hereditary risk for colon cancer in particular had a huge number of advanced colonic adenomas, the precursors to colon cancer, compared to people who were not athletes.
Oh, but you're talking about marathon runners. So
I'm talking about marathoners and ultramarathoners. So exercise at a vigorous rate in kind of normal amounts, we're not talking sedentary here, we're talking pretty hard exercise, decreases the risk of colon cancer recurrence in people who've had colon cancer. But if you're an ultramarathoner or a marathoner and you're young, it may increase your risk.
That is, so I must say.
By a lot. So
a lot.
41% had an adenoma at that age. And the usual is 15 to 25%. So that's quite a bit more. And 15% had advanced adenomas. And I think that's because really, I don't know, we don't know, but if you made me try to take a guess as to why that would be, is if you do long periods of exercise, many areas of your body become ischemic. And one of the areas that becomes ischemic is the gut. Blood is shunted away from the gut to the muscles so that you can exercise for long periods of time. And perhaps that injures the gut, and repeated injury might be problematic. It certainly is in other tissues, can lead to cancer. So, for instance, smoking and lung cancer, there's repeated injury of the lung every cigarette. So maybe it's something like that. We don't know. But I thought that is a really important place where that U-shaped exercise curve comes in
again. I must say, and this may be a bias on my part because I could never do what they do, but people who are long distance runners who run, I think I did one 5K race, but people who do longer runs, half marathons and marathons, I think a fair proportion of them look to me to be sarcopenic. And I have always presumed that they have low muscle mass because they're not doing something like lifting weights as well. But what you just said suggests to me maybe they don't absorb food even if they do eat during their run, but they may spend a fair amount of their day with their colon having diminished perfusion. Their gut in general, not just their colon. There's several parts to the gut, but having diminished circulation to the gut, I wonder if that impairs caloric absorption in an efficient way.
Well, that's an interesting question.
Don't you think a lot of runners look too skinny?
Well, they certainly are thinner than usual, but apparently we Americans think thin is normal is thin.
Right. With your GLP-1 drug in your back pocket, right?
Yeah. So we underestimate. We think someone who's overweight is normal weight, and someone who's obese is just overweight. Yeah. Whereas if we actually run the numbers, it's like, oh no, you're in that category.
Well, I think you and I bandied back and forth a little bit. Another paradox about exercise, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were talking something about the relationship between exercise and loss of sleep.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
One of the things that is really worrisome is when someone sleeps, less than 6 or 7 hours a night chronically, their risk of cancer goes way up. And, so does exercise in that circumstance, is it helpful or is it harmful?
So there have been some studies that we're not looking at cancer, but we're looking at, the common observation, and this was in Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, that I read, not long after it came out, quite a while ago. And they took a group of people in a conference kind of setting and subjected half of them to a diminished night of sleep. They had to stay up later and wake up earlier. And all they did was observe the people's behavior at the buffets the subsequent days. And when you don't have enough sleep, you overeat carbohydrates, raise your blood sugar, impair your insulin sensitivity, and tend to put on weight when you don't eat enough. And that has been kind of observed that just when not in an experimental setting, but that sleep loss definitely changes the metabolics of your glucose tolerance and also can impair your ability to make muscle, so to process the proteins that you want in a healthy way, yields the ground to your desire craving for more sugar-related food, which makes you fatter and more likely to get diabetes. And in that situation, exercise seems to mitigate that tendency for sleep loss to send you to the wrong end of the buffet table.
Oh, that's good to know. I think that, one of the problems with sleep loss is that it decreases agency, which in plain English is willpower, and the ability to make decisions, forego immediate gratification for better gratification later, et cetera, for higher reward later. That goes out the window with sleep loss because it requires energy.
Oh, that
brain
is
energy.
interesting.
There's certain neurotransmitters that relate to that.
Does that explain donuts? Morning donuts?
I think it does. Good. We can go home now. And, so it may be hard for people who have been sleep deprived to actually get up the agency to go exercise instead of eating that donut. It's probably not going to happen. But, there's a mouse model that called the APC, MIN plus minus mouse model. And they restricted these mice, restricted their sleep for 4 hours to 4 hours or less per day, and then had them exercise. And this study found that sleep loss nullified or even reversed the immune and carcinogenic anti-carcinogenic effects of regular exercise. So in other words, it made it worse for these mice to exercise if they were chronically sleep deprived. So
the exercise in a sleep deprived mouse
made things worse.
Made things worse.
But I think that there's some nuance here, and I think what I'm telling my patients now, and I'm sure this will change as I get better and new information. But what I tell patients now is we do it day by day. And as you know, I ask my patients to wear sleep trackers, exercise trackers, those kinds of things. And we look. You're sleep deprived. You missed, you only got 3 hours of sleep last night. All right, go for a walk. Let's see if your heart rate variability improves or gets worse. If it starts to get worse, go in and take a nap. If it's getting better and your stress is going down, you're great, keep going, et cetera. We actually look. And I think that that's where the answer to these kinds of questions, where there are two correct answers, I think all of these studies, they're not lying and they didn't do bad studies. It's just that there's different situations and all the variables aren't apparent. There's a lot of opacity in these situations that we can't see through at this point. And so we can actually look at each person individually and see, right now, looking at their tracker, are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And one of the beautiful markers for that, biomarkers, is heart rate variability.
That's a wonderful one. And I actually I want to pull out my phone right now and see if I don't think my Oura Ring tracks that during the day. I think it just tracks it at night when I sleep.
A lot of things just track it at night. There are certain apps and like HeartMath that you can use that clips on your ear and attaches to your smartphone. You can look at your heart rate variability in real time. And those are great for answering a question like this, like, what do I need to do right now? Do I need to take a nap or do I need to go for a little walk?
That is a great idea. I recommend, so as part of the protocol for reversing Alzheimer's, we have people do physical recovery, physical exertion, physical recovery, mental exertion, mental recovery. And the mental recovery we recommend is the HeartMath app, and because it's so easy to use. If you want to change your heart rate variability, it tells you to breathe in a certain way, and it says, oh, you're not paying attention right now. How about coming back to what we were doing, in sort of a nice way, and tells you what your heart rate variability is. But how wonderful to have it as a tool. I'm not going to sit down and do it right now, but I can wear the little device for a minute or two and see what it just says where I am. That's brilliant. I'm going to start thinking about I'm going to try that out. I have a HeartMath at home.
Yeah, I have one too. I don't use it all the time, but I use it once in a while, and I recommend it for patients who are interested in those kinds of things. It's not for everyone. Some people just, aren't ready or able or built to do tracking, that kind of tracking and intervention.
What is, I just have to do this because I try to put a plug in this for in almost every time I open my mouth and talk about anything. But if you had a bad night's sleep, what's one thing you might do to try and get yourself better through the day?
Yeah. Oh, boy. One thing I do is take 20 grams of creatine. I think that's the answer you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, my question was really about the dose. But yes, I've been telling people if you could only take one supplement in life, it should be creatine. And I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but it makes a point in the moment, and I get it. But so I was going to say 10 grams of creatine. So will you say a little bit about 20 grams for sleep recovery?
Well, I follow a lot of the health bros on the internet, and one of my favorite health bros, and I think yours too, is Dr. Rhonda Patrick.
Yeah, who's not a bro at all. She's a sis.
So I'm sorry if I got the pronouns wrong. But so I one of the things that she's been looking at, and she does a lot of deep research, and it's excellent, is creatine, and she talks about that, and she's had some interesting guests on, and I've looked into their research. And right now, everything seems to add up with 20 grams a day for older women, especially in the sleep-deprived state. Now, I will change that if and when new data suggests, or my own personal experience for me suggests that's not the right dose. But I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's placebo effect, but I believe I can feel a difference when I'm sleep deprived and use creatine or don't use creatine, and in ways that suggest that creatine is very beneficial. And I use CreaPure. I have switched from types that don't use CreaPure to using CreaPure. I don't have a lot of data that suggests that that's super important, but it's something to consider, and people can look into that. That's the supposedly purest form of creatine, which different brands will put into their creatine bottles and put their own labels on it. I want people to understand that. So yeah, I do. I recommend it, and I use it myself. And watching the research, and will update my use and recommendations as that comes out.
Yes, stay tuned. There will never be a final answer to this. There's always going to be new information. I aim for typically about the dose based on kind of weight and bump it up a little bit. So I take between 7 and 10 grams of creatine a day.
Do you notice if you miss for a few days?
Miss my creatine?
Okay. All right.
No, I'm in fact not traveling with it when I'm going out of town this weekend, so we'll see. But I don't know that I know. There are so many moving parts.
Wait a minute. You're not taking it? Why? Because they'll stop you at the TSA?
No, I'm realizing now that I say this, I know I have a great way to actually pack it in. We're trying to go light, but yes, and I've got CreaPure in little envelopes. I get my creatine monohydrate in a much more mundane way. I get it in bulk because I can't stand buying things in little plastic containers over and over again.
Oh, okay.
And bulksupplements.com is a good source, typically third-party tests well for their different powdered supplements. So,
okay, good to know.
And that works well for me. I do want to say we're saying all this stuff about how you recover from bad sleep, but you can't plan. It's so important to not just say, I don't care if I don't sleep well, because I can always take some creatine and then go for a run later in the day if my heart math says it's okay. We need to prioritize sleep.
We do. And, one thing that I've noticed is that Whoop Band, they have this little AI coach that comes with your app, and it tries to personalize your recommendations based on, there's a little journal where you can write down that you've taken creatine that day, and they match up your sleep with various other parameters, and they give you advice. And my Whoop always says you should always get up at the same day or same time every morning.
I do believe that.
Well, and then Whoop also grades your sleep, and then will tell you which items in your lifestyle are affecting your sleep, either good or bad. One of the bad things for me is if I get up at the same time every day. I have a lower recovery rate. And I have figured out why. And that's because if I really need to sleep in a little bit to get, a little bit more REM sleep or something like that, you tend to get more in the second half of the night. I need to pay attention to that. It matters for my actual heart rate recovery, heart rate variability. So, some of these rules, which are in general good, may not be applicable to absolutely everyone.
Everybody,
And so you need to track your own response to these variables. Like, should I sleep in? Should I not? I'm going to sleep in when I can, if I feel like it. Because I know that if I don't listen to my body, which says stay in bed another hour, I will have a lower heart rate variability that day, no matter what the rules, even the Whoop app rules.
So I think I could generalize a little bit here, because I think in general, you are somebody who does not have trouble falling asleep. And just the idea that you could decide to stay in bed an extra hour. I mean, let me, I have a normal life and I have to go to work and everything like that. I know, but if, I could wake up at 5:30 and say, I'd really like another hour of sleep, but I can't go back to sleep.
Because you can't sleep, or because you have to get up to do take care of some responsibility?
Because I can't go back to sleep once I really have that morning. I can go back to sleep if I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I can't go back to. So two things. I have a harder time going to sleep in general. Sleep is, I would say, my long-term health challenge more than anything else. And I adhere to the cognitive behavioral therapy suggestion that for me, who might have trouble going to sleep, I should get up at very close to the same time every day, if not exactly the same time. I don't think you have that trouble of sometimes not being able to go to sleep.
Oh, I can go to sleep. I typically fall asleep pretty quickly once I get in bed and turn out the lights. That's not an issue. In the morning, if I wake up at 5:30 and have to go to the bathroom or something like that, I will be able to go back to sleep if I need to.
Could you bottle that and share a little bit of it with me, please?
Yes, it's called glycine.
I do glycine too.
Okay. So for our listeners, glycine is known to aid sleep. And one of the ways that it does this, which is really interesting, is that it decreases the urge to urinate at night.
Yes.
So you should bottle that up. And the dose is 3 grams. It's a lot. And to get that effect. So people can try that if their doctors think that it's safe for them. It should be. It's the most common amino acid in your body, and your body makes a lot of it. It's pretty safe. But do check before you do anything you hear us talk about on this podcast with your own doctor.
Two little random comments about glycine is that it's also a precursor for the neurotransmitter GABA. So it not only helps you stay asleep by reducing the urge to urinate, but by enabling your body to make more GABA during the night as you metabolize your glycine. And there's a test I do with people that's nicely covered by Medicare, but it's a simple collect the urine in the morning and send it off for testing, a nutrient assay, and it tests by how well the nutrients are working in your body and by the urine metabolites, not what is the level of B12 in your body, but is it working the way it should? And it also gives a little survey of amino acid adequacy and glycine deficiency by about 3,000 milligrams a day is by far the most common. Which is 3 grams, people. Which is 3 grams, is by far the most common amino acid deficiency.
Interesting. What's the name of this test?
It's called, so you think of the word metabolism and change the SM to an X. So I call it metabolomics. And Genova Diagnostics offers it, and it's not expensive. So Medicare covers it, and MedAdvantage and other private insurance partially covers it. And it's fascinating because it tests nutrient adequacy, including amino acids. It gives you both supplement suggestions and food suggestions. Oh, I need alpha lipoic acid. I can't stand to take one more pill. Oh, but I do like to eat liver. And look at what it says about liver. That's interesting.
Give me a pill, please.
I knew you were going to say that. I did that for you. Thought of you as I had my liver pate this morning.
Well, liver pate is actually pretty good.
There you go.
I like liver pate.
I will bring you some at the office.
Oh, that's
because I always have pints of it in the house.
Great. All right.
But it also tests.
I said anything.
Right. Don't worry. It also tests for toxicity from either gasoline or plastics, and it tests for toxicity antioxidant capacity, and it tests for oxalate tolerance.
My goodness, this is the Swiss Army knife of
The Swiss
your
Army
analyses.
I love it. I kind of think everybody, I'd like to do it on each of my patients once a year. And the more time after you've done it, and I've worked with somebody about it once or maybe twice, they can look at the results themselves and figure out what to do. They don't need doctor guidance because it's so well organized how it presents the information. So yes, plug for Genova Diagnostics.
There you go. Wow.
Well, I think we've covered the pros and cons of sleep, of exercise, of glycine, of heart rate variability, of getting up at the same time. Is there anything else that is sitting as a bee in your bonnet this morning?
No, I think I won't be running more than 40 miles a week. But I can be walking up hills for 15 to 30 seconds fast.
Little brisk bouts of it. Yes.
Yes, over and over.
See
once
you
or
there.
twice a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Always good. And I'll look forward to that bucket of liver.
I won't bring you a whole bucket. Don't worry.
All right.
Good talking to you. See you next time.
Bye, Deborah.
Bye.
If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe. Your simple click is not abstract. It's not anonymous. To us, it's very, very real. It helps us reach more patients and physicians to challenge the old ways of thinking about health and to keep these evidence-based conversations going. Hitting that subscribe button actually makes a huge, huge difference, and thank you.
You have been listening to the Lemanne Gordon podcast, where docs talk shop.
For podcast transcripts, episode notes and links, and more, please visit the podcast website at
docstalkshop.com.
Happy eavesdropping. Everything presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is established or implied. If you have a health or a medical concern, see a qualified professional promptly.
We make no warranty as to the accuracy, adequacy, validity, reliability, or completeness of the information presented in this podcast or found on the podcast website.
We accept no liability for loss or damage of any kind resulting from your use of the podcast or the information presented therein. Your use of any information presented in this podcast is at your own risk.
Again, if you have any medical concerns, see your own provider or another qualified health professional promptly.
You must not take any action based on information in this podcast without first consulting your own qualified medical professional. Everything on this podcast, including music, dialogue, and ideas, is copyrighted by Docs Talk Shop.
Docs Talk Shop is recorded at Freeman Sound Studio in Ashland, Oregon.